Montana Territory, 1875. The frontier stretched endlessly before Owen Aldridge, a vast promise of possibility that had yet to fulfill its word. As he guided his sorrel gelding through the dense pine forest, the 25-year-old cowboy adjusted his well-worn Stetson, squinting against the late afternoon sun that filtered through the branches. The spring had been unusually wet, making the mountain trails treacherous, but Owen knew these paths better than most. 3 years working cattle for the Rocking M Ranch had taught him the rhythm of this wild country. Yet for all his competence in the saddle, Owen remained a solitary figure. He preferred it that way, or so he told himself. The West was no place for attachments. Men who allowed themselves to care too deeply inevitably found themselves broken by the harshness of frontier life. Owen had witnessed it too many times, good men undone by lost loves, abandoned homesteads, and dreams that withered like grass in August heat. A man rides alone in this country if he wants to survive, his father had told him before consumption had claimed him 2 winters past. Owen had taken those words to heart, along with the family pocket watch that now weighed in his vest pocket. The trail narrowed as it curved around a rocky outcropping. Owen leaned slightly, compensating for the slope, when a sound carried on the wind, faint but unmistakable, a child crying. He reined his horse to a stop, listening. Wilderness played tricks on a man's ears, but there it was again, more distinct now. Owen hesitated only briefly before turning his mount toward the sound. Whatever his philosophy about keeping to himself, he couldn't ignore a child in distress. The crying led him to a small clearing where a wagon sat at an awkward angle, its rear wheel shattered beyond repair. Beside it huddled a young woman and a small child of perhaps 4 or 5 years. The woman looked up at his approach, startled and fearful. She immediately pulled the child behind her, her blue eyes wide with apprehension. "I mean no harm, ma'am," Owen said, raising his empty hand while keeping the other on his reins. Heard the little one crying. "Thought I might be of assistance." The woman, no more than 22 by his estimation, straightened her back but maintained her protective stance. Her blonde hair had come loose from its pins, falling in waves past her shoulders. Her traveling dress, once a cheerful blue calico, was smudged with dirt and torn at the hem. "We had an accident," she said, her voice steady despite the wariness in her eyes. "The wheel broke when we hit that rock. My husband," her voice faltered, "my husband was thrown, he did not survive the fall." Owen removed his hat in respect. "I am truly sorry for your loss, ma'am." "Violet Forrester," she offered after a moment. "And this is Emma," she gently nudged the little girl forward. The child had her mother's blonde hair and blue eyes, though her face was red and streaked with tears. "Owen Aldridge, at your service," he replied with a slight bow of his head. "Where were you headed, Mrs. Forrester?" "To Timberline, my brother has a claim there." Her shoulders slumped slightly. "Though I am not certain we will find him. His letters stopped coming 6 months ago." Owen glanced at the broken wagon, then at the darkening sky. Night would fall soon, and these mountains were no place for a woman and child alone. "Timberline's a good 30 miles from here," he said, "and that wheel won't be fixed without a proper wheelwright." He dismounted, approaching carefully. "I work for the Rocking M, about 5 miles east of here. The foreman's wife would welcome your company while we figure things out." Violet hesitated, studying him. Owen knew what she saw. A tall, lean cowboy with sun-browned skin, 3 days of stubble on his jaw, and clothes dusty from the trail. Not necessarily someone to trust with her life and her child's. "We have nowhere else to go," she finally admitted, "but I have some belongings I cannot leave." "We can take what will fit in my saddlebags, and I will return for the rest tomorrow," Owen offered. As they gathered her essential belongings, Owen noticed how efficiently Violet moved despite her circumstances. This was a woman accustomed to hardship, yet there was a gentleness in how she soothed her daughter, promising adventures ahead when the child whimpered about leaving her doll's cradle behind. With Emma secured in front of him and Violet riding his horse while he walked alongside, they began the journey to the ranch. Owen found himself telling them about the Rocking M, about Mrs. Morales, who ran the kitchen and would fuss over them about the foals born just last month. "Is it a very big place?" Emma asked, her small voice curious. "Big enough," Owen replied. 3,000 acres, 200 head of cattle. Small compared to some spreads, but the boss, Mr. Miller, believes in quality over quantity." "And you, Mr. Aldridge?" Violet asked. "What do you believe in?" The question caught him off guard. "Keeping to myself mostly," he answered honestly. "A man who minds his own business tends to live longer out here." Something like disappointment flickered across her face. Yes, I suppose that is the frontier way. The rocking M came into view as dusk settled, a collection of sturdy log buildings nestled in a protected valley. Light glowed from the main house, warm and inviting against the coming night. Mrs. Morales, as Owen had predicted, took one look at Violet and Emma and immediately ushered them inside, clucking in dismay at their condition. "You poor things, come, come, we will get you fed and settled," she shot Owen an approving look. "You did right bringing them here, Owen. Now go tell Mr. Miller while I take care of these ladies." 3 days later, Owen found himself volunteering to escort Violet and Emma to Timberline to search for her brother. Mr. Miller had given his blessing, recognizing that Owen was one of the few hands who could be spared during calving season. "Just be back in 2 weeks," the rancher had said, "and take the bay mare for Mrs. Forrester. That old nag pulling their wagon wouldn't have made it much further anyway." The journey to Timberline took 4 days of steady travel. During those days, Owen learned more about Violet than he had intended. She had married Thomas Forrester at 18, a man 15 years her senior who had promised her security after her parents died of typhoid. They had struggled to make a living farming in Nebraska before Thomas had heard about the mining opportunities in Montana. "He wasn't an unkind man," Violet confided one evening as they sat by the campfire, Emma already asleep nearby. "But he never quite found his footing in this world. Always chasing the next opportunity, the next chance to strike it rich." Owen nodded, understanding all too well the allure that drew men westward. "And your brother, what's his claim in Timberline?" "Victor has a small silver mine. Nothing spectacular, but his letters spoke of steady returns, enough that he invited us to join him." She poked at the fire with a stick. I hope he is still there." Owen studied her in the firelight. In just these few days, she had already shown remarkable resilience. She rode well, never complained about the hard ground at night, and maintained a cheerful demeanor for Emma's sake despite her uncertain future. "If he's not," Owen found himself saying, "there are other options. The territory has plenty of opportunities for those willing to work hard." She looked up, surprised by his encouragement. "You sound almost optimistic, Mr. Aldridge. I thought you preferred a solitary existence." "Owen," he corrected, "and maybe I'm reconsidering certain notions." The words slipped out before he could catch them, and they surprised him as much as they seemed to surprise her. A small smile curved her lips before she turned her attention back to the fire. Timberline proved to be a disappointment. Victor Forrester had indeed owned a promising silver claim, but according to the local Asir, he had sold it 6 months ago and headed to California after a violent dispute with another miner. "Left no forwarding address," the Asir told them sympathetically. "Said something about making a fresh start where the weather wasn't trying to kill him half the year." Violet's composure finally broke when they returned to the small hotel room Owen had secured for her and Emma. "What am I to do now?" she whispered, tears streaming down her face as Emma napped on the narrow bed. "I have $43 to my name and no prospects." Owen, uncomfortable with her distress but unwilling to leave her alone, awkwardly patted her shoulder. "We'll figure something out. There's always work at the Rocking M for the right people." She looked up, hope flickering in her tear-filled eyes. "You think Mr. Miller might have a position? I can cook, clean, so anything really." "Mrs. Morales has been asking for help in the kitchen since last winter," Owen said. "And there's a small cabin near the main house that's standing empty. It's not much, but it would be a roof over your heads." The next morning, they began the journey back to the Rocking M. Emma, who had initially been shy around Owen, now chattered happily from her perch in front of him, pointing out interesting rocks and asking endless questions about ranch life. "Are there other children there, Mr. Owen?" she asked. "The foreman has 2 boys about your age," he replied, "and it's just Owen, little one. Will you teach me to ride my own horse someday?" The question made him pause. "If your mother permits it, I suppose I could." He glanced at Violet, riding beside them. She was watching their interaction with a soft expression he couldn't quite decipher. "It seems my daughter has taken quite a shine to you," she commented that evening as they made camp. Owen shrugged, embarrassed. "Children are easily impressed by cowboys, nothing special about me." "I disagree," Violet said quietly. "There is something special about a man who would go out of his way to help strangers, who treats a little girl's questions with respect, who offers solutions instead of pity." She hesitated. "I am very grateful, Owen." Her words stirred something in him, a longing he had suppressed for so long he had almost forgotten it existed, but he quickly tamped it down. Getting attached would only lead to pain when she inevitably moved on to something better than ranch work. Their return to the Rocking M coincided with a spring storm that drove them inside the main house upon arrival. Mrs. Morales immediately took charge, directing Owen to stoke the fire while she helped Violet and Emma into dry clothes. "Mr. Miller wants to see you when you're settled," the housekeeper told him.
"He's in his study."
Andrew Miller, owner of the Rocking M, was a fair employer who had given Owen a chance when he'd arrived 3 years ago with nothing but his saddle and a willingness to work. The rancher looked up from his ledgers as Owen entered. "Found the brother?" he asked without preamble. "No, sir, he'd moved on to California, sold his claim." Miller nodded thoughtfully. "And the woman and child? She's hoping you might have work for her. She's capable and willing." Miller studied Owen for a moment too long. "You seem invested in their welfare." "Just doing what's right," Owen replied defensively. "Mrs. Morales could use the help," Miller agreed, "and that cabin by the cottonwoods needs someone living in it. Makes more sense than having them take up space in the bunkhouse or main house." He closed his ledger. "She can start tomorrow. Standard wages, room and board included." Relief washed over Owen. "Thank you, sir, I'll let her know." Violet's gratitude was immediate and effusive. "I cannot thank you enough," she said, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "This is more than I dared hope for." Owen shifted uncomfortably under her appreciation. "It's nothing. Just put in a good word with Mrs. Morales about adding more pie to our Sunday dinners." Spring became summer, and Owen found himself inventing reasons to stop by the main house kitchen. Mrs. Morales noticed, of course, her knowing smiles making him flush when she caught him lingering over coffee while Violet kneaded bread or stirred stew. Emma had become the ranch's unofficial mascot, trailing after Owen whenever he was performing chores near the buildings, asking him to identify birds or explain how branding worked. He found himself saving interesting feathers or unusually shaped stones to present to her, rewarded by her delighted smile. One evening in late July, Owen was repairing a section of fence near Violet's cabin when she approached with a covered dish. "Mrs. Morales said you missed supper," she explained. "I thought you might be hungry." He accepted the food gratefully. "That's kind of you, I lost track of time." "You work too hard," she observed, settling on a nearby stump. "Emma says you're the best cowboy on the ranch." Owen chuckled. "She's easy to impress." "She has good judgment," Violet countered. "She sees your kindness." Owen concentrated on his plate, uncomfortable with her praise. "How are you finding ranch life?" he asked, changing the subject. "Better than I expected," she admitted. "Everyone has been welcoming. Emma is thriving with the Morales boys to play with, and she hesitated. "I find myself feeling hopeful again." She looked directly at him then, and Owen felt something shift between them, a recognition of possibilities he had been avoiding acknowledging. "Violet," he began, uncertain what he wanted to say. A shout from the direction of the main house interrupted whatever might have followed. One of the hands was running toward them, waving urgently. "Fire at the north pasture," the man called. "Boss needs all hands." Owen jumped to his feet. "Stay here," he told Violet. "Keep Emma inside until we know it's contained." The fire, started by a lightning strike, threatened a significant portion of the ranch's summer grazing land. For 2 days, every able-bodied man fought to control the blaze, digging fire breaks and beating back flames. When Owen finally returned to the ranch, exhausted and smoke-stained, he found Violet waiting anxiously on the porch of the main house. "You're hurt," she said immediately, noting the burned sleeve of his shirt and the angry red skin beneath. "It's nothing," he tried to dismiss, but she was already leading him inside to the kitchen where she had water and bandages prepared. As she gently cleaned the burn, Owen was acutely aware of her closeness, of the soft concern in her eyes, of the way her hands moved with such care over his injured arm. "I was worried," she admitted softly, "when the men started returning and you weren't among them." "Stayed behind to make sure the last of it was out," he explained, his voice rougher than he intended. "Didn't mean to cause you concern." Her hands stilled on his arm. "I find myself concerned about you quite often, Owen Aldridge." Their eyes met, and Owen felt the last of his carefully constructed walls begin to crumble. This woman who had endured loss and uncertainty with such grace, who had built a new life for herself and her daughter through sheer determination, was looking at him as though he mattered, as though he was someone worth caring about. "That's a dangerous habit to develop," he said hoarsely. "Perhaps," she acknowledged, "but one I find myself unwilling to break." Before he could respond, Emma came running in, her face lighting up at the sight of him. "Mr. Owen. You're back." Mama was so worried she couldn't sleep. Violet blushed but didn't contradict her daughter's innocent revelation. August brought the county fair, and Owen found himself offering to escort Violet and Emma. The little girl was beside herself with excitement, dressed in her best pinafore, her blonde hair neatly braided with blue ribbons that matched her mother's dress. The fairgrounds were alive with activity, livestock exhibitions, handicraft displays, food stalls, and games of skill and chance. Emma dragged them from one attraction to the next, her enthusiasm infectious. "Look, Mama," Mr. Owen. "They have a shooting gallery." She pointed to a booth where men were testing their marksmanship for prizes. "Would you like me to win you something?" Owen asked, surprising himself with the offer. Emma nodded enthusiastically. "Can you?"
Really?
"Let's find out." He paid the attendant and took up the rifle, aware of Violet and Emma watching expectantly. Years of hunting had made him a decent shot, and he carefully aimed at the row of metal targets. 5 shots, 5 targets down. The booth operator whistled, impressed, and gestured to the prize display. "Take your pick, Cowboy." Emma selected a small stuffed bear with glass button eyes, clutching it to her chest with unbridled joy. "I'm going to name him Owen," she declared. The child's innocent declaration struck him more deeply than he expected. He glanced at Violet, who was watching him with an expression that made his heart race. As they continued through the fairgrounds, Owen found himself reaching for Violet's hand when they navigated through crowds. She didn't pull away, instead lacing her fingers through his with a shy smile that made him feel 10 feet tall. They were watching a horse race when Owen noticed a man staring at them from across the track, a hard-looking fellow with a scar running down his cheek. Something about the man's intense focus made Owen uneasy. "Do you know that man?" he asked Violet quietly. She followed his gaze, then stiffened visibly. "That's Jeremiah Dawson," she whispered. "He was Thomas's business partner in Nebraska. They had a falling out before we left."
Not a friendly face, I take it. No, she admitted.
"He blamed Thomas for some bad investments, said Thomas owed him money." Owen instinctively moved closer to her. "Does he have any legitimate claim against you?" "None whatsoever. Thomas may have had his faults, but he was clear that his debts died with him." She glanced around. "Perhaps we should go. I don't want Emma upset." They made their way back to the wagon, Owen keeping a protective eye out for Dawson. The man didn't approach them, but Owen caught him watching their departure with an expression that promised trouble. The following week brought the first hint of autumn to the air, a crispness that invigorated the ranch's preparations for winter. Owen found himself spending more evenings at Violet's cabin, first under the pretense of helping with repairs, then simply for the pleasure of her company after Emma was asleep. They would sit on the small porch, talking in low voices about everything and nothing. His childhood in Illinois, her dreams of someday having a small place of her own, books they had read, places they hoped to see. "Do you ever think of moving on?" she asked one evening. "Finding your own spread instead of working someone else's land?" Owen considered the question, used to dream about it. "Saving up for my own place, proving I could make something of myself." He looked out at the darkened ranch, at the familiar shapes of buildings he had helped maintain for 3 years. "Lately, though, I've been thinking there might be other dreams worth pursuing." He felt her gaze on him but didn't quite have the courage to meet it. They sat in companionable silence until the chill drove them inside. The peace was shattered 3 days later when Jeremiah Dawson rode onto the rocking M with 2 rough-looking companions. Owen was working with the horses when they arrived, demanding to speak with the Forrester woman. "She ain't here," the stable hand replied warily. "What's your business?" "That's between me and her," Dawson growled. "Her husband owed me money, and I aim to collect." Owen stepped forward, measuring the men with a practiced eye. All 3 were armed, their hands hovering near their sidearms with the casual readiness of men accustomed to violence. "Mrs. Forrester has no outstanding debts," Owen stated firmly. "Any business you had with her husband died with him." Dawson's eyes narrowed. "And who might you be?" "Owen Aldridge, I work here." "Well, Aldridge, this isn't your concern. The woman owes me $500, and I'm not leaving without it." "That's a lie," came Violet's voice. She had emerged from the main house, her expression calm despite the pallor of her face. "Thomas owed you nothing, Jeremiah, and you know it. You're the one who cheated him." Dawson dismounted, his scarred face twisting into an unpleasant smile. "There's the little widow, still pretty as ever." He took a step toward her. Your husband made investments on my recommendation. Not my fault they didn't pan out, but a debt's a debt. There was never any written agreement, Violet countered, and you disappeared when the bank came looking for you. Owen moved to stand beside her, keenly aware that Emma might be watching from the house. I suggest you gentlemen leave, he said quietly. The lady has made her position clear. Or what, Cowboy, one of Dawson's companions sneered. You'll ask us real nice. The tension was broken by the arrival of Mr. Miller and the foreman both carrying shotguns. Is there a problem here? Miller asked, his voice deceptively mild. Dawson assessed the changing odds and took a step back. No problem. Just having a discussion about an outstanding financial matter. Any financial matters can be addressed through the proper legal channels, Miller replied. This is private property, and you're not welcome here without invitation. For a moment Owen thought Dawson might challenge them, but the man finally shrugged with exaggerated nonchalance. We'll be in town for a spell, plenty of time to resolve this. His gaze shifted to Violet. We'll talk again real soon. After they rode off, Miller turned to Violet. Is there any truth to his claims? None, she said firmly. He's a swindler who cost Thomas what little savings we had. Now he's trying the same scheme with me. Miller nodded. I believe you, but these men look like trouble. Until they move on, I want someone with you and Emma at all times. That night Owen took the first watch outside Violet's cabin, his rifle across his knees as he sat on the porch steps. The door opened around midnight and Violet emerged with a blanket and cup of coffee. You should be sleeping, he chided gently. So should you. She sat beside him, draping the blanket around both their shoulders. I am sorry to have brought this trouble to your door. Owen shook his head. You didn't bring anything. Dawson's the problem, not you. She was quiet for a moment. He will not simply go away. Men like him never do. Then we'll deal with him, Owen said with more confidence than he felt. You're not alone, Violet. She leaned against him slightly, her warmth seeping through his shirt. No, she agreed softly. I'm not alone anymore. 2 tense days passed with no sign of Dawson and his companions. On the third morning, Owen rode into town for supplies, keeping a wary eye out for trouble. He was loading purchases into his saddlebags when he overheard a conversation from the alley beside the general store. The woman's got a kid, Dawson was saying. We take the kid, she'll find the money fast enough. Owen's blood ran cold. Moving quietly, he positioned himself where he could see the 3 men without being observed. Snatching a kid's serious business, one of the companions objected. That's the kind of thing that gets a man hanged. Not if we're smart about it, Dawson insisted. We leave a note, tell her where to bring the money. Once we have it, we tell her where to find the kid. Simple. And if she goes to the law? She won't, not with her precious daughter at stake. Dawson spat on the ground. We move tonight. The ranch hands will be celebrating payday at the saloon. Perfect timing. Owen had heard enough. He finished loading his supplies and rode back to the ranch as quickly as he could, his mind racing. He found Miller in the barn examining a lame horse. Dawson's planning to kidnap Emma tonight, he said without preamble. Heard him planning it in town. Miller straightened, his expression grave. You're certain? Heard it myself. They know it's payday, figure most hands will be in town. The rancher considered this information. We could involve the sheriff, but by the time he organizes a posse, they could be long gone, Owen finished. We need to get Violet and Emma somewhere safe immediately. My sister has a place near Bozeman, Miller offered. It's a hard 2-day ride, but they'd be safe there. Owen nodded. I'll take them, but we need a plan for Dawson too. As long as he's looking for them, they won't be truly safe. Miller's expression hardened. Leave Dawson to me and the boys. You focus on getting them to safety. Violet took the news with remarkable composure, quickly packing essentials while Owen explained the situation to Emma in terms that wouldn't frighten her. They were going on an adventure, a secret journey that required her to be very brave and very quiet. They left within the hour, taking a little-used trail that headed east before it would curve north toward Bozeman. Owen led them at a steady pace, constantly scanning their surroundings for any sign of pursuit. They made camp that night in a sheltered ravine, far from any established trail. Owen built only a small fire, enough to warm some coffee and heat the bread and dried meat they had brought. Emma fell asleep quickly, exhausted by the day's tension and travel. Violet tucked the blanket around her daughter before joining Owen by the fire. You think they discovered we're gone? She asked quietly. Almost certainly, Owen replied, but they won't know which way we went. Miller was going to have some of the boys leave false trails heading west and south. She nodded, staring into the flames. I keep thinking about what might have happened if you hadn't overheard them. Her voice trembled slightly.
If they had taken Emma. Owen reached across the space between them, taking her hand in his. But they didn't, and they won't. Her fingers tightened around his. Because of you, she looked up, meeting his gaze directly. You have been our protector from the moment we met, Owen. I don't know how I can ever repay such a debt. There is no debt, he said firmly. What I've done because. He hesitated, the words he wanted to say catching in his throat. Because, she prompted, her blue eyes reflecting the firelight. Because I care about you, he admitted finally. Both of you, more than I thought possible. She moved closer, her face now inches from his. I care about you too, she whispered, so much that it frightens me sometimes. Owen raised his free hand to her cheek, hardly daring to breathe. Violet. She closed the distance between them, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that started tentative but quickly deepened. Owen pulled her closer, his heart pounding as she wound her arms around his neck. When they finally separated, both breathing hard, Owen pressed his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that for a long time, he confessed. She smiled, a beautiful sight in the flickering firelight. So have I. They were halfway to Bozeman the next day when disaster struck. A sudden mountain storm forced them to seek shelter in an abandoned line shack. As Owen tended to the horses, he noticed one of the mares favoring her right foreleg. She's pulled a tendon, he told Violet grimly after examination. She can walk, but not with a rider. We'll have to continue with just my horse. The delay meant they were still a day's ride from safety when Owen spotted dust on the horizon behind them, riders moving fast on their trail. They've found us, he said, his stomach clenching with dread. We need to move faster. But with 3 people on one horse, speed was impossible. By late afternoon, Owen could make out 3 distinct riders gaining steadily. They reached a fork in the trail as the sun was beginning to set. Owen made a quick decision, helping Violet and Emma dismount. Take the left fork, he instructed. It leads to a settler's cabin about 2 miles ahead, the Wallace family. Tell them I sent you and why you need shelter. Violet's eyes widened in understanding. What are you going to do? Lead them away, he said grimly, checking his revolver. Take the right fork, make them follow me instead of you. That's too dangerous, she protested. There are 3 of them. And they'll catch all of us if we stay together, he countered. This is the only way to keep Emma safe. Tears filled her eyes. Owen, please. He pulled her close, kissing her fiercely. I'll find you, he promised. Just get to safety. Emma, sensing the gravity of the situation, clung to his leg. Don't go, Mr. Owen. He knelt, meeting her frightened gaze. I need you to be brave for your mama, little one. Can you do that for me? She nodded solemnly, though her lower lip trembled. With a final glance at Violet, Owen mounted and spurred his horse down the right fork, making no attempt to hide his passage. As he'd hoped, the pursuing riders followed his trail rather than checking the fork. He led them on a desperate chase as darkness fell, using his knowledge of the terrain to stay just ahead. His horse was tiring, but so were theirs. If he could just reach the ridge ahead, he might find a defensible position. A shot rang out, the bullet whizzing past his ear. Owen ducked lower in the saddle, urging his mount to greater speed. More shots followed, most wide of the mark in the fading light, but one grazed his arm, sending a line of fire across his bicep. The ridge loomed ahead, a rocky outcropping that would provide cover. Owen reached it and dismounted in one fluid motion, slapping his horse's rump to send it running as he scrambled among the boulders. Dawson and his men approached cautiously, spreading out to surround the position. We know you're there, Aldridge, Dawson called. Just tell us where the woman and kid are and maybe we'll let you walk away. Owen remained silent, conserving his ammunition, waiting for a clear shot. One of Dawson's companions moved closer, silhouetted against the last light of dusk. Owen aimed carefully and fired. The man cried out, clutching his shoulder as he fell. You'll pay for that, Dawson snarled, firing blindly into the rocks. The gunfight continued as full darkness descended, muzzle flashes briefly illuminating the scene like lightning. Owen managed to wound the second man in the leg, effectively taking him out of the fight, but Dawson was more careful, using cover effectively. It's just you and me now, Cowboy, Dawson called. Tell me where they are and this ends now.
Come and get me, Owen replied, shifting position silently. He heard movement to his left, Dawson circling around. Owen waited, barely breathing, until a shadow moved against the stars. He fired twice in rapid succession. Dawson grunted in pain but returned fire immediately. Owen felt a white-hot impact in his side that knocked him back against the rock. He struggled to maintain consciousness, knowing that if he passed out, Dawson would finish him and continue hunting for Violet and Emma. Gritting his teeth against the pain, Owen reloaded his revolver. He heard Dawson moving again, closer now, confident in his advantage. "You're bleeding out, Aldridge," Dawson said, his voice strained but triumphant. "Tell me where they are and I might get you to a doctor." Owen remained silent, gathering his strength. When Dawson's shape appeared against the night sky directly above him, Owen fired upward. The shot caught Dawson in the chest. He staggered backward with a shocked expression before toppling over the edge of the ridge, landing heavily on the ground below. Owen dragged himself to where Dawson lay. The man was still breathing, but the wet sound told Owen the bullet had found a lung. "It's over," Owen said wearily. Dawson coughed, blood bubbling at his lips. "She ain't worth dying for," he wheezed. "You're wrong about that," Owen replied before darkness claimed him. He awoke to pain and the sensation of movement, being carried on an improvised stretcher. Blinking against morning light, Owen made out familiar faces, ranch hands from the rocking M. "He's awake," someone called. The stretcher was lowered and Mr. Miller's weathered face appeared above him. "Welcome back to the land of the living, Aldridge." "Violet," Owen croaked. "Emma." "Safe," Miller assured him. "We found them at the Wallace place. They told us which way you'd gone." Relief flooded through Owen, stronger than the pain of his wound. "Dawson." "Dead," Miller confirmed. "His companions are in custody. The sheriff's quite interested in their other activities, seems they're wanted in 2 territories." They transported Owen back to the Rocking M, where the local doctor extracted the bullet and pronounced him lucky. The shot had missed vital organs, though he'd lost considerable blood. Violet refused to leave his bedside during his recovery, tending him with gentle hands and fierce determination. Emma brought him small treasures, a particularly smooth stone, a wildflower, placing them solemnly on the table beside him. "Mr. Owen," she asked on the 3rd day, climbing carefully onto the edge of the bed, "are you going to be my new papa?" The innocent question hung in the air. Owen glanced at Violet, who had frozen in the act of changing his bandage, her cheeks flushed. "Emma," she began, "that's not—" "Yes," Owen interrupted, surprising himself with his certainty. "If your mother will have me, I would very much like to be your papa." Violet's eyes filled with tears as she stared at him. "Owen, you don't need to." "I love you," he said simply. "Both of you. I tried to keep to myself like I always have, but you changed everything. This isn't gratitude or obligation speaking. This is me asking if you'll make a family with me." Emma bounced excitedly on the bed, making Owen wince but smile through the pain. "Mama, say yes," she pleaded. Violet laughed through her tears. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you, Owen Aldridge." 6 weeks later, with his wound healed and his heart fuller than he had ever imagined possible, Owen stood before the small church in town. Mr. Miller stood beside him as best man, while Mrs. Morales fussed with his tie. When the music began and the doors opened to reveal Violet in a simple white dress, Emma preceding her with a basket of wildflowers, Owen felt a certainty he had never known before. The frontier was indeed a harsh place, but it was also a place where love could take root and flourish against all odds. As Violet joined him before the preacher, her hand warm in his, Owen silently thanked whatever twist of fate had led him down that mountain trail on a spring afternoon to find a lost mother and her child. "I love you," she whispered as they turned to face their future together. "And I love you," he replied, "more than I ever thought possible." Spring came again to Montana Territory. On the small piece of land Owen had purchased near the Rocking M, a neat cabin stood with smoke curling from its chimney. Nearby, a barn housed their horses and milk cow, while a chicken coop and vegetable garden promised sustenance for the coming year. Owen stood on the porch, watching as Violet helped Emma collect eggs, their laughter carrying on the morning air. His wife, the word still filled him with wonder, glanced up and caught him watching. She smiled, that same smile that had first cracked the walls around his heart nearly a year ago. Later, as they sat together on the porch swing, Emma asleep inside, Violet rested her head against his shoulder. "Happy?" he asked, knowing the answer but wanting to hear it anyway. "Completely," she confirmed, placing his hand on her slightly rounded belly. "All of us." Owen Aldridge, once convinced that a man survived the frontier by remaining alone, now knew the opposite was true. It was love, messy, complicated, occasionally terrifying love, that made survival meaningful. And as he held his wife close under the vast Montana sky, he silently thanked whatever guardian angel had guided him to that broken wagon on a spring afternoon, to the beginning of everything that mattered.